Eaton wanted to present on this particular topic is that we deal with a lot of customers out there in the market, and there's a lot of people who don't understand that there is all this money out there to be used, that utilities are eager to give it away to the right qualifying programs, and it's a shame if we're not taking advantage of it. So today we're going to talk a little bit about background behind utility rebates, what it means to, why is it important, what does it mean to the utilities. We'll talk a little bit about, at a high level, how utility rebates work. And then we're going to dive into some real life case studies and show how some Eaton customers have saved some real dollars. And then we'll just talk about, at the end, how do we go about, just some general advice about how to go about it. And leave time for some question and answers. So here's a few factoids that are out there regarding data center operation, data center costs. In addition to the ones that are up on the screen, I think there's also something put out by the Uptime Institute that for every $1 million of IT equipment that's out there, it'll consume $1.2 million worth of energy over its life. Right? And so right now a lot of people talk about energy being the second highest or the third highest cost in their data centers. It won't be long before energy is the highest cost in the data center. And the reason is that electricity rates are going to go up. Two main reasons for that. One is renewables, as there's a pressure to do more with renewable energy. Right now, renewable energy is more expensive to produce than regular coal-fired plants. The coal industry gets more subsidies than the renewable industry does, which keeps the cost of electricity way down. The other thing that's going to make electricity energy costs go up in the future is smart grid. Right? A lot of this electrical infrastructure that we enjoy today in the United States was fully depreciated decades ago. And as new generation comes online, and as they try to make the distribution systems out there more intelligent, all that new equipment that needs to be bought and put in place is going to come at a cost. And that's one of the, without getting too far off the topic of this presentation, that is one of the headwinds to smart grid being more implemented out there, is that the cost to put in these smart meters and some of this other equipment is actually going to have to show up in your utility bill. And the public utility commissions obviously don't want that. We as consumers don't want that. And so, but that money, that investment has to come from somewhere. So that's some of the trade-offs we deal with today. But for certain utility rates in the future, you can count on them going up. So when you stop to think about it for a minute, why would a utility want to pay you to use less of their product? Right? I mean, if you think about all the vendors that are out in the exhibition hall, not too many of them are going to talk to you today about ways that you can avoid using their product. Right? It's going to be quite the opposite. But for utilities, it's a little bit different. They're a different entity. There are regulatory requirements put on them by the federal government about these rebates, and part of it, with the EPA and stuff. The EPA tries to use the utilities to drive their efficiency programs, and they do that in terms of regulations on the utilities. As the demand on our grid in the United States increases, utilities really want to avoid or put off for as long as possible having to build a new generation plant. It's an expensive proposition. It's a difficult proposition getting it through local towns and states, in terms of where you're going to build it. So that's a real headache. One thing that talked about already was peak demand generation costs. So as you get to that peak demand that the utilities can provide in terms of kilowatts, as you go up, those last kilowatts cost a lot more to produce than the kilowatts that that are well under the limits of the generation plants. And one of the things that we think about is that you can't, those things show up. A lot of people think about, all right, my electricity rate is 10 cents a kilowatt hour, 12 cents a kilowatt hour, sometimes less. But what a lot of people don't understand is as you get to these peak demand generation points, the utilities will start putting fuel surcharges onto the bill. So you're still paying only that, maybe 8 cents a kilowatt hour, but there will be a period of time where maybe you're paying $3 per kilowatt hour or $2 per kilowatt hour for a period of 6 hours or something like that in a day as a fuel surcharge. And that's how they cover for some of these other events. And the utilities know when this is going to happen well in advance. They have day-ahead pricing, real-time pricing based on seasonality. When it's going to be a hot day, they know there's going to be more usage. It's going to cost them more. They pass that on to onto business. Finally, everyone wants a green image. That's with all the talk about sustainability and a greener planet. It's good public relations for the utilities, who are typically seen as polluters and not good for the environment. This is their way of trying to straighten that out a little bit. So that's why utilities really offer, among many things, rebates. Why data centers, right? I mean, there was a article put out, I think, by the New York Times earlier this year that energy usage in the data center hasn't grown as drastically as people predicted it to a couple years ago. I think it's under 2% of total electricity usage in the United States goes towards data centers, maybe closer to 1.5%. That's true today, but powering IT equipment and the support around powering IT equipment is the fastest growing application, fastest growing electricity user on the market today. And that's why there's so much attention on it. I mean, we all know these data centers are going up 10, 20 megawatts at a time. That's why it's got all this attention. So, talk about how do rebates actually work. And there are a lot of type of incentive programs out there, and they really vary by utility. There's too many to list specifically. But in general, you have types of programs. You have prescriptive programs, which are more or less predefined, and those are probably like your light bulbs, right? When you buy a certain light bulb, you get an automatic rebate sometimes you mail it into the utility, or a home thermostat that you can program. A couple years ago, I bought some programmable home thermostats for $25 at Home Depot, and I sent in a rebate card, and I got $25 back. That's prescriptive based on they already think they know how much energy you'll save, and they're willing to pay you in advance for that. The other is calculated. We're going to spend a little bit more time talking about that in this presentation. Calculated program is when you want, it's a little bit more custom, and you want to propose a project, and then there's a lot of iterations in terms of providing data, having a discussion back and forth with the utility. So that's another one. Then there's some upstream type programs, and that's really outside of most of the people in this room, and really happens behind the scenes, and doesn't give the utilities much of an opportunity for PR, but there are some things that happen behind the scenes that are upstream of our buildings that go into some of this. Some programs in particular, so those are the types of programs. Another way to look at it is through how electricity use is being curtailed. So there's demand response is one type. So Eaton is a demand response customer. So we've agreed with our local utility in Pittsburgh, where our electrical headquarters is that during certain times, we'll agree, they'll call us, and within a half hour, we'll agree to bring down so much electricity use in our building, either by shutting off every other air handler or dimming lights or doing whatever we have to do. And they give us a quarterly check for doing that. That's one type. The other side is demand side management. And again, that's more about what we'll talk about today. And that has to do with things or actions. I hate using the word things. Those are actions that you can take to reduce what you consume energy-wise. And then they'll, through this process, a lot of that's calculated. You'll get a rebate for your actions. Market transformations, are another type, and those are more educational type programs that utilities put on. So one example of a prescriptive program is this the PG&E example we have on the slide, where based on taking servers offline, dead servers or unused servers offline, they already know how much they're willing to pay for that. And there was some discussion about that in another session. But here's one example where some PG&E incentives are already defined. They have similar stuff for disk storage as well. So in general, those are at a high level some of the types of rebate programs that are out there. So again, we're going to talk a little bit about this at the very end of the presentation, but some of the things that the utilities can do, the intent of this slide is to show that utilities not only will pay you for virtualizing your servers or upgrading your crack units or UPSs, but they'll also help subsidize the feasibility studies and the engineering studies that would go into determining whether or not these things are a good idea. So they actually have money set aside that'll help you determine whether or not it's a good project to begin with. So don't discount that. And that really comes in, so I'm going to talk about a high-level 5-step process. Some people say less, some people say more, but based on some of the actual work that we've done, this is a good way that we kind of categorize the data. And the submit process is really, before you take any action, before you buy any equipment, do any kind of upgrade or replacement of any equipment, the best thing to do is really engage the utility right away. Engage them early, establish a dialogue with them, inform them of what you're planning to do, and see if you'd qualify for a rebate under their particular structure. They will know what type of ROIs they're looking for, how they're going to evaluate different types of projects. So really the point for the submit phase is engage with your utility, establish the dialogue with them, and really that'll really help tell you how you're going to proceed, and how it'll really determine for you the direction that you're going to take. So it's really probably the most important step out of all of these is that engagement with the utility. The next step is once you've come up with that plan, you've got to submit it, and they'll analyze it, right? So they'll run it through their criteria to see, based on the details of what you've provided, is it something that makes sense, under their programs. And you can almost always expect that this is going to be an iterative process. We haven't talked to any customers that have submitted something the first time and it's, they've gotten agreement. Typically, they want to know more. They'll want more data. They'll want to understand the application. They'll want to understand what are you comparing to, what baseline are you using to tell them that you're saving energy. So it's something that they'll work with you on, but it's not a one-shot deal. So just be prepared for that.